Lisa walked down the busy street, her old winter coat pulled tight around her shoulders. The shopping area was full of people rushing past, their arms loaded with bags from expensive stores. She used to be one of them, not too long ago. Then, she would walk into any store with confidence, her head held high, credit cards ready in her designer purse. But that was before everything changed, before her world fell apart. Now, at 45, she felt like a ghost walking among the living. People looked right through her as if she wasn't even there. Her clothes were clean but worn, her shoes comfortable but old. She had learned to keep her eyes down, to move quietly, to take up as little space as possible. The first store she entered was a clothing boutique, with bright lights and music playing softly in the background. Beautiful dresses hung on elegant displays, and the smell of expensive perfume filled the air. Lisa had always loved fashion, and even now, her eyes were drawn to a simple blue dress that would have looked perfect on her, a young woman behind. The counter looked up as Lisa entered. Her smile was polite but distant, the kind of smile you give to someone you hope won't stay long. Lisa could feel the woman's eyes following her as she moved slowly between the racks, running her fingers gently over the soft fabrics. "Can I help you find something?" the clerk asked, but her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Lisa looked at the price tag on the blue dress. $200. She had maybe $30 in her wallet, money she needed for groceries. "Just looking," she said quietly. The clerk nodded and turned back to her phone. Lisa stayed for a few more minutes, pretending to browse, but she could feel the uncomfortable tension in the air. She left without buying anything, the little bell above the door chiming sadly as she stepped back onto the sidewalk. The electronics store was worse. The moment she walked in, a security guard looked up from his magazine. He didn't say anything, but his eyes followed her every move. She had wanted to look at the phones, maybe see if there were any deals on something basic. Her old phone barely worked anymore, and she needed it for job interviews. A salesman approached her, but not in a helpful way. "Are you looking for anything specific?" he asked, standing a little too close, making it clear he wanted her gone. "I need a new phone," Lisa said. Trying to sound confident, he led her to a corner display with the cheapest models, phones that looked like they belonged in a museum. "These might be more in your price range," he said, not even bothering to explain the features. Lisa felt her cheeks burn with shame. She mumbled something about thinking it over and hurried out of the store. Behind her, heard the salesman chuckle and say something to his coworker that made them both laugh. The jewelry store was her final stop. It was the worst experience of all. She had only gone in because she was curious about a vintage watch in the window. It reminded her of one her grandmother used to wear, simple and elegant, with tiny diamonds around the face. The owner, a well-dressed man with gray hair, looked up from behind the counter as she entered. His expression changed immediately when he saw her. Didn't smile, didn't welcome her, just watched her with suspicion. Lisa approached the counter slowly. "Could I see the watch in the window?" she asked politely. The man hesitated, then walked over to the display, picked up the watch but didn't hand it to her. Instead, he held it just out of reach. "This is a very expensive piece," he said. "It's $3,000. "I understand," Lisa replied. "I just wanted to look at it. It reminds me of my grandmother's watch." The man's expression softened slightly, but he still didn't let her hold it. "It's a beautiful piece, but perhaps you'd be more comfortable looking at our estate jewelry section down the street. They have more affordable options." The words hit her like a slap. More comfortable. As if her comfort was the issue, not his obvious belief that she didn't belong in his store. Lisa nodded and turned to leave, but as she reached the door, she heard him speaking to another customer who had just entered. "Welcome, how can I help you today?" His voice was warm and friendly, completely different from the cold tone he had used with her. Standing on the sidewalk outside, Lisa felt tears threatening to spill over. She had been dismissed, ignored, and judged, all in the space of one afternoon. The worst part wasn't even the way they had treated her. The worst part was that she was starting to believe they were right. Maybe she didn't belong in those stores anymore. Maybe this was just who she was now. She thought about her old life. When she had been a successful marketing manager at a tech company, she had owned a house, driven a nice car, taken vacations to Europe. People had respected her opinions, valued her ideas. She had been somebody. The divorce had taken everything. Not just the money and the house, but her confidence, her sense of self. Her ex-husband had been smart about hiding assets, and by the time the lawyers were finished, she was left with almost nothing. The job market was tough for someone her age, especially someone who had been out of work during the long, painful divorce process. Now, she lived in a small apartment across town. It's the kind of place she used to drive past without noticing. She had sold most of her nice clothes, her jewelry, everything of value, just to pay rent and buy food. But she was still the same person inside, wasn't she? She still had the same mind, the same heart, the same dreams. As she walked down the street, Lisa noticed other people like her. An elderly man sitting on a bench, his clothes neat but threadbare. A young mother counting coins at a bus stop, her children fidgeting beside her. A veteran with kind eyes and worn hands, holding a sign asking for work. All of them invisible to the shoppers hurrying past with their full bags and busy lives. When did she stop seeing people like this? When did she become one of the people who looked through others instead of at them? The realization was almost as painful as the treatment she had received in the stores. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across the pavement. Lisa pulled her coat tighter and started the long walk home. Tomorrow, she would try again to find work to rebuild her life. But tonight, she felt more alone than she had ever felt in her life. She didn't know that just around the corner, in a small shop filled with forgotten treasures, someone was about to see her in a completely different way. Someone who would remind her that being invisible was only temporary, that every person has value that can't be measured by the clothes they wear or the money in their wallet. But that discovery would have to wait for another day. 3 days had passed since Lisa's terrible experience in the shopping district. She had tried to forget about it, but the memory kept coming back like a bad dream. Every time she closed her eyes, she could see the suspicious looks, hear the dismissive voices, feel the shame burning in her cheeks. She had spent those 3 days in her small apartment, applying for jobs online and trying to stay positive. But the rejection emails were piling up, and her savings were getting dangerously low. She needed to get out, to breathe some fresh air, even if it meant facing the world again. This time, she decided to take a different route through the city. Instead of the main shopping street where everyone had ignored her, she wandered down a quieter side street she had never noticed before. The buildings here were older, with character and history written in their brick walls and wooden signs. When she saw it, a small shop squeezed between a coffee house and a used bookstore. The window was filled with interesting objects that seemed to tell stories of their own. An old globe sat next to a collection of vintage cameras. Delicate china cups were arranged around an antique jewelry box. A hand-painted sign above the door read, "Helen's Vintage Treasures," in faded gold letters. Lisa stopped walking and stared. At the window display, something about it felt different from the other stores she had visited. It wasn't trying to intimidate anyone or show off expensive price tags. It looked like a place where every item had been chosen with care, where each piece had its own special story to tell. She stood there for several minutes, just looking. A rocking chair sat in the corner of the display. She could imagine someone's grandmother sitting in it, telling stories to children gathered at her feet. An old typewriter made her think of love letters written late at night by candlelight. Beautiful, isn't it? Lisa jumped slightly at the voice. She turned to see a woman in her early 60s standing in the doorway of the shop. The woman had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and her silver hair was pulled back in a simple bun. She wore a comfortable sweater and a genuine smile that reached all the way to her eyes. "I'm sorry," Lisa said quickly. "I was just looking. I wasn't planning to buy anything." The woman's smile grew wider. "Looking is free, dear. That's what windows are for." She stepped closer and gazed into her own display. "I change it every week. This week's theme is stories waiting to be told. Next week, I'm thinking about doing dreams from yesterday." Lisa found herself smiling for the first time in days. "That's a lovely way to think about old things." "Old things aren't really old," the woman said with a twinkle in her eye. "They're just experienced like people, you know. They get more interesting with age, not less." She extended her hand. "I'm Helen, by the way. I own this little treasure hunt of a shop. I'm Lisa, she replied, shaking Helen's warm hand. Well, Lisa, you look like someone who could use a cup of tea and a comfortable chair. Would you like to come in? It's no pressure to buy anything. Dad has brewed a fresh pot, and it's too much for one person. Lisa hesitated. After her recent experiences, she wasn't sure she wanted to enter another shop. But something about Helen felt different. Her invitation seemed genuine, not like the polite, book-cold welcome she had received elsewhere. I don't want to bother you if you're busy, Lisa said. Helen laughed, a warm sound that made Lisa feel at ease. Busy, dear, on a Tuesday afternoon? My biggest concern is making sure my cat doesn't knock over the display of vintage teacups. Come on in. I'd love the company. The inside of the shop was even more amazing than the window display. Every corner was filled with treasures that seemed to glow in the soft light. Crystal vases caught the sunlight streaming through the windows. Old books with worn leather covers sat stacked on shelves next to delicate porcelain figurines. The air smelled like lavender and old wood, a comforting combination that made Lisa feel like she was visiting someone's beloved grandmother. Helen led her to a small seating area in the back of the shop, where two comfortable chairs sat around. A tiny table. A large orange cat was curled up in a basket nearby, purring contentedly. That's Oliver, Helen said, pointing to the cat. He's my business partner. He's excellent at judging character. If he doesn't like someone, they usually don't find anything they want to buy. If he approves, they end up leaving with treasures they didn't even know they needed. As if he had heard his name, Oliver opened one green eye and looked at Lisa. After a moment of consideration, he stood up, stretched, and walked over to rub against her legs. Well, would you look at that? Helen said, setting down a delicate teacup filled with steaming tea. Oliver likes you. It's a very good sign. Lisa bent down to pet the cat, feeling some of the tension leave her shoulders. When was the last time she had felt this relaxed around strangers? When was the last time someone had been kind to her without wanting something in return? This is a beautiful place, Lisa said, accepting the tea gratefully. How long have you owned it? Helen settled into her chair with her own cup. 5 years now. Before this, I worked in corporate finance for 30 years. Wore suits every day, attended boring meetings, worried about quarterly reports. She shook her head with a smile. I thought that was success. Turns out, real success is doing something that makes you happy to get up in the morning. What made you change? Lisa asked, genuinely curious. Life gave me a little push, Helen said simply. I got laid off when the company downsized. I was 57, and nobody wanted to hire someone my age. I spent months feeling sorry for myself, applying for jobs that never called back, watching my savings disappear. Lisa nearly choked on her tea. Helen's story sounded so familiar, so much like her own experience. But then Helen continued, I realized I had a choice. I could keep trying to fit back into a world that didn't seem to want me, or I could create my own world. So I took what little money I had left, rented this tiny space, and started collecting things that spoke to me. Turns out, they spoke to other people too. Weren't you scared? Lisa asked. Helen nodded, terrified. But you know what I discovered? Being scared and being brave aren't opposites. You can be both at the same time. In fact, you can't really be brave unless you're scared first. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, sipping tea and watching Oliver chase dust particles in the afternoon sunlight. Lisa felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Here in this cluttered little shop with this kind woman and her philosophical cat, she felt like she belonged. You know, Helen said eventually, you have the look of someone who understands beautiful things. I can see it in the way you look at my treasures. Would you like me to show you around? Love telling the stories behind the pieces. For the next hour, Helen led Lisa through the shop, sharing the history of various items. A music box that had belonged to a famous dancer, a set of books that had traveled across 3 continents with a missionary family, a necklace that had been a wedding gift in 1943. As they talked, Lisa found herself relaxing completely for the first time in months. Helen didn't ask nosy questions about her life or make assumptions about her circumstances. She simply treated Lisa like a friend, like someone whose opinion mattered. When it was time to leave, Lisa felt genuinely sad to go. Thank you, she said at the door. This was exactly what I needed today. Helen smiled and squeezed her hand. Come back anytime, dear. The teapot is always on, and Oliver enjoys having visitors who appreciate fine things. Walking home, Lisa felt different, lighter somehow. One person had seen her as worth spending time with, worth talking to, worth treating with kindness. Maybe she wasn't invisible after all. Maybe she just needed to find the right place to be seen. 2 weeks had passed since Lisa first walked into Helen's shop, and it had become her favorite place in the whole city. Every few days she would find herself walking down that quiet side street, drawn to the warm glow of the vintage treasures, and the promise of Helen's friendly smile. Helen never made her feel like she had to buy anything. Instead, she treated Lisa like an old friend who just happened to drop by for tea and conversation. They would sit in those comfortable chairs in the back of the shop, with Oliver purring nearby, talking about everything and nothing, while the afternoon sun painted golden patterns on the old wooden floors. Today was different. Though, when Lisa arrived, Helen was standing in the middle of the shop, with her hands on her hips, looking frustrated. What's wrong? Lisa asked. Setting down her small purse on the counter, Helen sighed and gestured toward a corner of the shop that Lisa had never really noticed before. I've been trying to organize that section for months, but I keep putting it off. It's just a jumbled mess of things I bought at estate sales. Some of it might be valuable, some of it might be junk, but honestly, I don't know the difference anymore. Lisa looked over at the corner Helen was pointing to. It was indeed a mess, boxes stacked on top of each other. Items wrapped in newspaper, and things that looked like they hadn't been touched in years. But something about it intrigued her. What? You like some help? Lisa offered. I have nothing else to do today, and I actually enjoy sorting through old things. Helen's face lit up. Really? You wouldn't mind? I was about to hire someone to come in and just throw half of it away. Don't throw anything away yet, Lisa said quickly. You'd be surprised what treasures people overlook. They spent the morning carefully unpacking boxes and sorting items into different categories. Helen made sandwiches for lunch, and they ate while surrounded by decades of forgotten belongings. Lisa found herself completely absorbed in the work. There was something almost meditative about handling each piece, imagining its history, wondering about the hands that had held it before as the afternoon wore on. Lisa picked up a simple ceramic vase from one of the deeper boxes. It was cream-colored with delicate blue flowers painted around the rim. To most people, it would have looked like something you might find at any thrift store. But as Lisa turned it over in her hands, examining the bottom, her heart began to race. Helen, she said quietly, trying to keep her voice steady, where did you get this vase? Helen looked up from the jewelry box she was examining. That old thing? I think it came from the Peterson estate sale last spring. Why is something wrong with it? Lisa ran her finger along the small mark on the bottom of the vase. It was partially worn away, but she could still make out the distinctive signature. She had seen this mark before, years ago, when she was still married and living a different life. This isn't just any vase, Lisa said softly. This is a piece by Eleanor Morrison. Helen looked blank. I'm sorry, should I know that name? Lisa sat down heavily in her chair, still holding the vase carefully. Eleanor Morrison was a ceramic artist who worked in the 1940s and 50s. She only made pieces for about 10 years before she died young in a car accident. Her work is incredibly rare. How rare? Helen asked, moving closer. Lisa looked up at her friend, hardly believing what she was about to say. The last piece I saw sell at auction went for $8,000. It was smaller than this one. Helen's eyes widened. 8,000? For that little vase? Helen, this could be worth even more. Morrison's pieces with the blue flower pattern are especially sought after by collectors. I remember reading about them in art magazines when my ex-husband and I used to attend auction previews. For a moment, both women just stared at the vase. Then Helen sat down slowly in her chair, looking dazed. I paid $15 for that at the estate sale, she whispered. The woman selling it said it was just her grandmother's old flower vase. Lisa carefully set the vase down on the table between them. The grandmother probably had no idea what she owned. It happens more often than you think. People inherit things and just see them as old stuff taking up space. But how do you know so much about this? Helen asked. I mean, you recognized it immediately. Lisa felt her cheeks warm. She hadn't talked about her old life much with Helen, preferring to focus on the present rather than dwell on what she had lost. But now she realized she had never really told Helen about her background. Before everything fell apart, I used to collect art and antiques with my ex-husband, Lisa explained. It started as a hobby, but I got really passionate about it. I spent years learning about different artists, studying auction catalogs, visiting galleries. I had a good eye for spotting valuable pieces, had Helen asked gently. Lisa shrugged. When we divorced, he got most of the collection. I lost interest in it after that. It just reminded me of what I used to have. Helen was quiet for a moment, looking thoughtfully at Lisa. You know, I bet there are other valuable things in these boxes that I've been completely overlooking. Things that would just look like junk to me but are actually treasures to someone. Who knows what to look for? Probably, Lisa agreed. Estate sales are gold mines if you know what you're looking at. Yeah. People just want to get rid of their relatives' belongings quickly, so they price everything to sell fast. Lisa, Helen said. Slowly, would you be willing to go through more of these boxes with me? Not just today, but regularly. I mean, if you found one piece worth thousands of dollars in just a few hours, imagine what else might be hiding in here. Lisa felt a flutter of excitement in her chest, something she hadn't experienced in months. The idea of hunting for treasures, of using the knowledge she had thought was worthless now, of actually being useful again, it was almost too good to believe. You really want my help? She asked. Lisa, you just potentially saved my business, Helen said earnestly. If this vase is really worth what you think it is, it'll pay my rent for several months. Of course I want your help. The question is, would you want to help me? Lisa looked around the cluttered shop, at Oliver sleeping peacefully in his basket, at Helen's kind face, waiting for her answer. For the first time since her divorce, she felt like someone needed her skills, valued. Her knowledge saw her as more than just a woman down on her luck. Yes, she said simply. I would love to help you. Helen smiled so brightly that her whole face seemed to glow. Then let's start tomorrow. We'll go through every single box, every corner of this shop. Who knows what other treasures we'll find. Lisa walked home that evening. She felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Purpose. She had spent so many months feeling useless, like all her knowledge and experience meant nothing in her new life. But today had shown her that sometimes the skills you think are lost forever are just waiting for the right moment to shine again. Behind her, Helen's shop glowed warmly in the evening light, full of mysteries yet to be solved and treasures yet to be discovered. And tomorrow, Lisa would be back to help uncover them all. A month had passed since Lisa discovered the valuable vase in Helen's shop, and everything had changed. What started as casual visits for tea and friendship had transformed into something neither woman had expected, a real partnership built on trust, respect, and shared excitement for finding hidden treasures. Every morning, Lisa would arrive at the shop just as Helen was opening the doors. They had developed a routine that felt as natural as breathing. Helen would make coffee while Lisa checked the items they had researched the night before. Oliver would supervise from his favorite sunny spot near the window, occasionally offering his opinion with a gentle meow. The vase had indeed sold for $9,000 to a private collector in Boston. When Helen handed Lisa her share of the money, they had agreed on a 50-50 split for anything Lisa authenticated. Both women had tears in their eyes. For Helen, it meant financial security for months. For Lisa, it meant something even more precious. Proof that she still had value in this world. I can't believe this is real, Lisa had whispered, holding the check with shaking hands. It was enough to pay her overdue rent, buy groceries for weeks, and even get her phone fixed. But more than the money, it was what the check represented. That mattered most. Since then, they had found 12 more valuable pieces hidden among Helen's inventory. A set of Depression-era glass dishes worth $800. A vintage jewelry box with a hidden compartment containing gold earrings. A painting that looked like an amateur landscape, but was actually signed by a well-known regional artist. From the 1960s, "You have magic eyes," Helen would tell Lisa every time she spotted something valuable. You see things that the rest of us completely miss. Lisa always laughed when Helen said this, but secretly, she was starting to believe it. Might be true. Her confidence was returning little by little, like a flower slowly opening to the sun. She found herself walking taller, speaking more clearly, smiling more often. The woman who had felt invisible just 2 months ago was becoming visible again. Even to herself, today was special because they were expecting their first serious collector to visit the shop. Word had spread through online forums about Helen's newly discovered treasures, and a man from the city had called asking to see their collection of vintage cameras. Lisa had identified 3 of them as rare models that photographers still sought. For their unique features, what if he doesn't think they're authentic? Lisa worried as she carefully arranged the cameras on a clean cloth. What if I'm wrong about their value? Helen stopped polishing a silver picture frame and looked at her friend with kind but firm eyes. Lisa, you've been right about everything so far. Trust yourself. You know more about these things than you realize. The bell above the door chimed, and a well-dressed man in his 60s entered the shop. He had the careful way of moving that serious collectors often have, like someone who knows that one careless step could damage something priceless. You must be Robert, Helen said warmly, extending her hand. I'm Helen, and this is Lisa, my partner and resident expert on vintage items. Lisa felt a warm flutter in her chest when Helen called her a partner. It was the first time she had used that word, and it made Lisa feel like she truly belonged somewhere again. Robert shook both their hands, but Lisa could see his eyes were already drawn to the cameras. These are beautiful pieces, he said, moving closer to examine them. May I? Of course, Lisa replied, her nervousness disappearing as she watched his careful handling of the equipment. The Leica there is from 1952, and it still has the original leather case. The Hasselblad is from the early 70s, and the light meter still works perfectly. Robert's eyebrows raised slightly. You know your cameras? I know a little about a lot of things, Lisa said modestly. Photography equipment was one of my interests when I was younger. For the next hour, Robert examined each camera carefully, while Lisa shared what she knew about their history and features. She found herself relaxing into the conversation, enjoying the chance to share knowledge that had been dormant for so long. Helen watched from behind the counter, beaming with pride at her friend's expertise. I'll take all 3, Robert finally announced. Your research is excellent, and the prices are very fair. Do you have other photography equipment coming in? We're always finding new pieces, Helen replied. Lisa has an incredible eye for spotting quality items. After Robert left with his purchases, Helen immediately pulled out her calculator. Lisa, do you realize what just happened? We made more money in one morning than I used to make in 2 weeks. It wasn't just the money that made Lisa feel amazing. It was the way Robert had listened to her opinions, asked for her advice, treated her like an expert. For over an hour, she had been the person others came to for answers, instead of the person everyone ignored. Helen, Lisa said carefully, I want to ask you something, but I don't want you to feel pressured to say, yes. What is it? Would you consider making this partnership more official? I mean, I know I don't have any money to invest in the business, but I could offer my time and knowledge. We could expand what we're doing, maybe start going to more estate sales together, build up a reputation as serious dealers. Helen was quiet for so long that Lisa started to worry she had overstepped. Maybe Helen just wanted help occasionally, not a full business partner. Maybe Lisa was asking for too much too soon. Lisa, Helen finally said, I was hoping you would suggest that, but I didn't want to pressure you. The truth is, this past month has been the most fun I've had since I opened this shop. Having someone to share the excitement with, someone who understands the thrill of finding hidden treasures, it's made everything better. Really? Really? Plus, Oliver absolutely adores you, and his judgment is never wrong, as if summoned. By his name, Oliver appeared and wound himself around Lisa's legs. Purring loudly, they spent the rest of the afternoon planning their new venture. Helen would handle the business side, accounting, customer service, shop maintenance. Lisa would focus on authentication, research, and building relationships with collectors. They would split profits equally and make all major decisions together. "We should get business cards made," Helen suggested excitedly. Helen and Lisa's Vintage Treasures. How does that sound? Sounds perfect, Lisa replied, though her voice was thick with emotion. 6 months ago, she had felt like her life was over, like she would never be anything more than someone to be pitied or ignored. Now she was about to become a business owner again, using skills she had thought were worthless. That evening, as Lisa walked home through the now familiar streets, she passed the shopping district where her nightmare had begun. The same stores were there, with their bright lights and expensive displays. But this time, she didn't feel small or invisible when she looked at them. She had found something those stores couldn't offer, a place where her knowledge mattered, where her opinions were valued, where she was seen not as a potential customer to judge but as a partner to respect. She had found her way back to herself, one treasure at a time. Tomorrow, she and Helen would start their new adventure together. And for the first time in months, Lisa couldn't wait to see what treasures tomorrow would bring. 6 months later, Lisa barely recognized her own life. The small side street that had once been just a quiet escape from the busy shopping district was now buzzing with activity. Word had spread through collector circles about the incredible finds at Helen and Lisa's Vintage Treasures. And people traveled from neighboring cities to browse their carefully curated collection. The shop itself had transformed too. What had once been a cluttered corner of forgotten items was now an organized showcase of authenticated treasures. Lisa had created small cards for each valuable piece, sharing its history and significance. Customers loved reading about the stories behind their purchases, and many said it made owning the pieces even more special. This morning was particularly exciting because they were expecting Victoria, a well-known antique dealer who had requested a private viewing of their recent estate sale finds. Lisa had spent the previous evening researching each piece they would show her, making sure she knew every detail about their history and value. "Are you nervous?" Helen asked, as they arranged items on the display table. Lisa paused to consider the question. 3 months ago, she would have been terrified to meet with someone so important in the antiques world. But now she felt confident and prepared. "Excited, not nervous," she replied with a smile. "I love sharing what we've discovered." The bell chimed, and Victoria entered the shop. She was an elegant woman in her 50s, dressed in a tailored jacket and carrying a leather portfolio. Lisa recognized her immediately from antique trade magazines, but instead of feeling intimidated, she felt proud to be meeting someone she had admired from afar. "Welcome to our shop," Lisa said warmly, extending her hand. "I'm Lisa, and this is my business partner Helen. We're so pleased you could visit us today." Victoria's handshake was firm, and her smile seemed genuine. "I've heard wonderful things about your authentication work. The photography equipment you sold to Robert last month was exactly as described, which is rare in this business." Helen beamed with pride, but gestured toward Lisa. "That's all thanks to Lisa's expertise. She has an incredible gift for spotting quality pieces and researching their backgrounds." As they moved through the shop, Lisa found herself completely at ease. She shared the story of a Depression-era tea set they had discovered, explained the significance of a vintage watch collection, and discussed the provenance of several pieces of estate jewelry. Victoria listened intently, asking thoughtful questions and taking notes in her portfolio. "This pocket watch is particularly interesting," Victoria said, examining a piece through her jeweler's loupe. "The engraving suggests it belonged to a railroad worker, probably from the 1920s. These are becoming quite sought after by collectors." "Exactly," Lisa agreed enthusiastically. "And if you look at the inside of the case, you can see the original repair marks from a watchmaker in Chicago. We traced the shop's history and found it was a well-known establishment that served the railroad community for over 40 years. Victoria looked up from the watch with obvious appreciation. That kind of research adds tremendous value to a piece. Collectors don't just want beautiful objects anymore. They want stories, connections to history. After 2 hours of examining their inventory, Victoria made several purchases and asked to be notified whenever they acquired new timepieces or jewelry. As she prepared to leave, she turned to Lisa with a thoughtful expression. "Have you ever considered writing about your finds?" There's a growing market for books about treasure hunting and antique discovery. Your research skills and storytelling ability would translate beautifully to that format. Lisa felt her heart skip. I've never thought about writing professionally, but I do love sharing the stories behind our pieces. Think about it, Victoria said, handing Lisa her business card. I know several publishers who would be interested in a book about finding hidden treasures in everyday places. Your perspective would be unique because you approach it with both expertise and genuine enthusiasm. After Victoria left, Helen turned to Lisa with sparkling eyes. A book. Can you imagine? Our little shop could be famous. Lisa laughed, but the idea was already taking root in her mind. She thought about all the amazing discoveries they had made. All the stories of families who had unknowingly owned valuable treasures. All the joy they had brought to collectors who found exactly what they had been searching for. Later that afternoon, as they were closing the shop, a young man hesitated outside their window. He was probably in his early 20s, wearing clothes that had seen better days, and he had the same uncertain look that Lisa remembered having just 6 months ago. I think we have a window shopper, Helen observed gently. Lisa watched the young man for a moment, seeing herself in his hesitation, his obvious interest warring with his apparent worry about not belonging in their shop. Without thinking twice, she walked to the door and opened it. Beautiful afternoon, isn't it? She said casually. Are you interested in vintage items? The young man looked startled. I was just looking. Don't really have money to spend on expensive things. Looking is free, Lisa replied with a warm smile, echoing the words Helen had said to her so many months ago. And you'd be surprised how affordable some treasures can be. Would you like to come in for a few minutes? We just made fresh coffee. She saw him hesitate, the same way she had hesitated before Helen's kindness had changed her life. I'm David, he said finally. I work at the coffee shop next door. I've been watching your shop for weeks, wondering what it was like inside. Well, David, I'm Lisa, and that's Helen. We love showing people around, whether they're buying anything or not. Come on in and meet Oliver. He's our official greeter. As David stepped inside, his eyes widened with wonder at the carefully arranged displays. Lisa watched his face light up as he spotted a collection of vintage books. And she saw him stop in front of a display of old fountain pens with obvious knowledge and interest. You know something about fountain pens? Lisa observed. David blushed. Slightly, my grandfather collected them, taught me how to restore them when I was younger. I always wanted to continue his collection, but he gestured vaguely at his worn clothes. Lisa exchanged a meaningful look with Helen. They had recently acquired a box of fountain pens that needed restoration work. Pieces that weren't valuable enough to send to professional restorers, but interesting to throw away. David, Lisa said thoughtfully, how would you feel about doing some restoration work for us? We have several pieces that need attention, and we'd be happy to pay you for your time. Plus, if you do good work, we might have a pen or two that we could let you have at cost. The hope that lit up David's face reminded Lisa so powerfully of her own journey that she felt tears prick her eyes. Here was someone else who felt invisible, someone else whose skills were being overlooked, someone else who just needed a chance to show what he could do. Really? David asked. You'd trust me with your antiques? Everyone deserves a chance to show what they're capable of, Lisa replied. Sometimes the most talented people are the ones everyone else overlooks. As the sun set over their little street, Lisa looked around at the shop that had become so much more than a business. It was a place where forgotten treasures found new homes, where people discovered the value of things they had thought were worthless, where second chances bloomed. Like flowers after rain, Helen was right. She did have magic eyes. But the real magic wasn't in spotting valuable antiques. The real magic was in seeing the worth in things that others overlooked. Whether those things were Depression-era glass, or middle-aged women starting over, or young men with hidden talents, and tomorrow she would open the doors again, ready to discover what new treasures and what new people might be waiting to be found.